gonna go over how to install red, and actually it's gonna be a step-by-step on how to install it on to a Tippmann M4 carbine. So this is red. The parts of red are the counterweight. This is your spring spacer that comes with it. This is the center bolt or the anchor, and these are your nuts and washers. So these are all the parts of red, and I'm going to show you guys how to put it into your gun. What I did was I took off the buffer tube, and all I actually did was I backed off the castle nut and I unscrewed the buffer tube. The buffer tube you're gonna have to prep for red, so we start by taking the stock spring assembly out, and then you're gonna have to separate this, right? So you're gonna have to take this apart and get the spring. So we took apart the stock spring assembly, so we unscrewed this with an Allen wrench. The only thing that we're going to reuse is the spring. So the spring is actually going to be slipped over red like that. So take off one washer and take off the lock nut. The lock nut is the one that's the last on this bolt, and then slip over the spring. Okay, so from there on we're set with this. We're gonna have to prep the buffer tube. So you see the little breather? We're gonna have to step this little hole up to 5/16 of an inch. So I'll grab some drill bits and I'll show you guys exactly what I do. All right, so when I talk about stepping up the hole to 5/16, what I actually mean is that we're gonna go through all these bits to get to the 5/16 size. So why we do that is because if we step through the bits, or if we go from the smallest to the biggest to the 5/16, it ensures that when we're drilling this hole, it stays center. If we just go from small to the 5/16, there's a good chance that we actually end up drilling it off center. And you don't want this off center. You want it to be dead center where the breather hole originally is. So I'll be right back. All I did was, again, go from the smallest drill bit, and I worked my way all the way up to the 5/16 hole, and that's what we have. So now we're gonna take red. You need a 1/4 inch Allen wrench, so, and that's to hold the anchor bolt inside red. So if you look at it, we have the one nut and the washer. That's gonna go in the buffer tube. Like that. And the nut is out on the other side. So then you take your other washer and you take your lock nut. A lot of people weren't familiar with what this was, what a lock nut was. So it's not damaged, it's actually purposely tight. It's called a lock nut because once you screw it down, you don't need Loctite for it. It's actually not gonna back off. So let me tighten that down and I'll come right back. And you're gonna need some leverage because the lock nuts are tight. So you see, I still have some play, right? I'm gonna take up as much play as I can, but I'm not gonna make it super tight. You still want red to actually be able to move a little. Okay, so I push it in again, and I still have just a slight play at the end, right? Take a little bit more of it up. I don't know if you guys can see that. So I'm not gonna crank the anchor bolt all the way down. I want the anchor to actually be able to move and move freely. So on the other side of Ed, you're actually going to have a little bit of a gap or a little bit of it sticking out, and that's totally normal. That's by design. So now how we install it on the gun is you put back your sling plate and you're just going to screw the buffer tube in. So while you're doing this, you want to make sure that you don't damage this little spring over here. That little spring is what actually holds this pin in. So keep your sling plate all the way back, and you're just going to screw it in all the way until until the buffer tube stops. Okay, so right there it actually stopped. So if you can see it, the buffer tube's not straight. So I'm going to back it off till it's straight. And then I'm going to check if I can charge the gun. So if I can charge the gun and the buffer tube's all the way in, you're good to go. So we're going to reinstall the sling plate. So you're going to push it down. You're going to tighten your castle nut. And with the AR tool or the armor's wrench, you want to tighten your castle nut so that this doesn't back off under the recoil. And that's pretty much it. Add your stock and you're good to go.